On a day when the suburban town of Conyers, Georgia, was yet unaware it would become the epicenter of a national horror. An unseasonable stillness hung in the air. The afternoon was clear and calm until the front door of a tidy house on Richmond Drive swung open, admitting two young, terrified figures. They were met not by a scream, nor by chaos, but by a smell. A thick, cloying, sweet and sour odor, known only to pathologists and butchers. It was so tangible it seemed to hang in the air like a dense fog, clinging to clothing, invading nostrils, coating the tongue with a metallic tang. It was the smell of blood. A vast quantity of blood. Senior Detective Ken Swift, whose 2 decades in the Violent Crimes Unit had hardened him to much, would later say at a briefing, pinching the bridge of his nose as if to recall the moment. Crossing that threshold, it was the first thing that hit you. Not the mess, not the sight of the body, but that smell. I've been to scenes, but this was like a slaughterhouse. I knew, before I took a full step, that we were dealing with something beyond the pale. The scene that unfolded before the first responders was one of grotesque, intimate violence. The home, which should have been a sanctuary, was a testament to a brutal, desperate struggle. It began in the living room. An overturned chair lay like a fallen sentinel. A shattered vase glistened with crimson droplets on the cream-colored carpet. A chaotic trail of spatter arcs and cast-offs, telling a silent, violent story, led from there down the hallway. The struggle had raged into the master bedroom, where bedding was torn from the mattress and a lamp lay broken. But the journey of horror found its terminus in the bathroom. There, in the white porcelain bathtub, the water tinted a deep, cloudy pink, lay the naked body of a middle-aged woman. She was clad only in a sheer negligee, her form curled fetal on one side. Her skin was a mosaic of violence, a horrifying canvas of over 80 stab wounds, so concentrated and furious that in some areas, wounds were layered upon wounds. Her spinal cord had been nearly severed. This was Nikki Whitehead, a loving, devoted single mother, or so everyone believed. Her teenage twin daughters, Taz and Jazz, were the ones who had made the grisly discovery after school. They stood outside now, wrapped in shock and police blankets, their faces pale masks of distress. To the officers on scene, they appeared as any children would be, shattered, orphaned by a monster. 2 petite, beautiful 16-year-old girls, their hair immaculate, their eyes wide with a trauma the veteran cops could scarcely comprehend. They were consoled, led gently to a squad car, asked soft questions about boyfriends, enemies, any clue that could point to the monster who did this. But Detective Swift felt a cold seed of doubt take root as he watched them. It was something in their eyes, a dryness beneath the wailing, a performative quality to their grief that didn't match the animal horror of the house. The hairs on the back of his neck, attuned to deception by years of interrogation, stirred. Who would want Nikki Whitehead dead? The initial investigation focused on those closest to her. Nikki's life, detectives soon learned, was a study in overcoming a troubled past. She was literally born in prison to a mother incarcerated on drug charges. Raised by her grandmother, Delia Frazier, Nikki's youth was turbulent, lacking the structure she would later desperately try to impose on her own daughters. At 17, she gave birth to twins, Tasmia and Jasmia, Taz and Jazz. Determined to break the cycle, Nikki dreamed of a better life. She moved the girls about 20 miles away to Conyers, pouring all her love and ambition into them. They received dance and music lessons. She did their hair and makeup with pride. For Nikki, when it came to her kids, it was always a celebration, a family friend would recall. The twins were bright, straight-A students who spoke of going to Harvard. But the path to success fractured as the girls entered high school. The word no became a battleground. Nikki, having known the consequences of a life without boundaries, grew more stern. Taz and Jazz bitterly resented her discipline. The rage simmered, boiling over in incidents police were already familiar with. Officer Myra Scruggs had responded to a call from Nikki months before the murder. After a blowout fight, Scruggs had sat with the twins in their bedroom, noting the closet full of name-brand clothes, the beautiful shoes. These girls really had a good home, she recalled. But the girls insisted they wanted to live with their great-grandmother, where the rules were relaxed. What unsettled Scruggs was the look on Nikki's face. She was fearful of those children, Scruggs said. She knew that they worked together. Scruggs had left that night with a gnawing feeling. Instead of driving off, she stayed close. Minutes later, she heard screams. Rushing back, she found Nikki running from the house, hysterical, a cordless phone in her hand, scratches on her neck and chest. The twins, however, were eerily calm. "You could have been two strangers, and there would have been more emotion shown," Scruggs noted. The girls showed no marks. Scruggs didn't believe a word they said. It was a chilling preview. Back in the present, at the bloody house on Richmond Drive, the physical evidence began to whisper a different story than the one the distraught twins were telling. The initial narrative of a jealous boyfriend, Nikki did have two, Robert and Joe, began to crumble under the weight of forensics and observation. On the drive to headquarters for questioning, an officer observed Taz in the back of the ambulance, biting her own arm. She explained it was a nervous habit. Inside the interrogation room, under the unblinking eye of the surveillance camera, the twins hugged, kissed each other's foreheads, and rocked in unison. When Detective Swift offered compassion, saying, "What can I do to make this easier for you?" they turned in eerie sync and asked, "Can we watch CSI?" Immediately, the hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up, Swift recalled. It was right then. This was something very, very off. Their grief was tearless. They spoke of their mother with cold detachment, insulting her even as they claimed to mourn. Detectives noted they were still wearing gloves. "What happened here?" an investigator asked, pointing to their hands. "A fight," was the vague reply. Meanwhile, the crime scene team was piecing together a damning puzzle. The sinks were meticulously wiped clean. In the back of the twins' closet, shoes were found with blood on them. In Taz's room, a pair of brown boots sat in a shoebox, caked in a significant amount of blood. And inside one boot, stuffed into the toe within a napkin, was a clump of hair that had been violently pulled from a scalp. The timeline the girls provided also collapsed. They claimed they missed the bus and walked to school. Yet surveillance from a nearby gas station showed them hitching a ride from a stranger. School security footage revealed they arrived mid-morning, not just 10 minutes late as they had said. They had a window of hours, not minutes. The most macabre clue, however, seemed to come from Nikki herself. The medical examiner, during autopsy, found human hair lodged between her teeth. Nikki had fought ferociously for her life. Combined with the clump of hair in the boot, it pointed to a violent struggle. And then there was the bite mark. the nervous habit Taz was seen trying to conceal. A dental examination of Nikki's teeth was performed. The result was a match. The arch, the spacing, it fit the wound on Taz's arm perfectly. To Nikki's credit, she did not go down without a fight, a detective would later state. She left evidence on one of her girls as a marker. The pieces locked into a horrifying picture. The lack of forced entry, the cleaned surfaces, the blood evidence hidden in their own closet, the fabricated alibi, the bite mark, the hair. For 4 months, as the twins were released to their great-grandmother and led a seemingly normal life, attending school, even going to prom, police quietly built their case. On the last day of school, before Summer could offer a chance to flee, detectives moved in. Taz was arrested at home, handcuffed and frisked with aggressive precision. Police then headed to Rockdale High to intercept Jazz. Their mugshots showed not terror, but defiance, a chilling arrogance. In the back of a patrol car, unaware the conversation was being recorded, their true natures bled through. "I'm not going down for something I did not do," one voice hissed. Then, a sneer. "They have coffee and donuts and having a good jolly old time." Facing overwhelming evidence, and after nearly 4 years awaiting trial, the twins finally cut a deal. To avoid a murder trial and possible life sentences, they pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and agreed to confess. In stark, emotionless detail, they described the morning of the murder. They were up late and didn't want to wake for school. A confrontation sparked. "I think I picked up a knife and I stabbed," one said flatly. "Where did you stab her?" "I think I stabbed in the stomach. It was multiple times." They described it as a joint effort, one holding their mother's hands, the other her feet. "She was heavy. We just put her in the tub." They revealed Nikki, in her final moments in the blood-filled water, had gasped a threat. "Kill me now, and I'll kill y'all." Then, she slipped under. "She went under a couple times," the twins said. And that was it. Detectives believed the attack was premeditated. A journal found in the home contained writings between the twins, discussing their hatred for their mother and a plan to get rid of her. The violence was an act of pure, concentrated rage. The 80 stab wounds, a furious testament to that. Evidence suggested Nikki had briefly escaped, making it to a neighbor's doorbell before being dragged back inside to her death. Both were sentenced to 30 years. In prison, Jazz would even graduate as her class valedictorian, a fact her great-grandmother Delia Frazier praised with bewildering pride. "I am so proud of her," Frazier beamed, standing by the granddaughter who helped murder her own mother. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober, analyzing the case, noted its rarity. Only about 2% of homicides are parricides, and within that, only 15% involve daughters killing their mothers. The majority of the cases where daughters kill their mothers, you see this quite often, 60, 70, 80 stabbings. There's just so much rage. The house on Richmond Drive stands quiet now, a permanent scar on a quiet street. Inside, the ghost of a struggle has faded, but the questions linger. How does love curdle into such hatred? How do children become monsters? The story of Taz and Jazz Whitehead is a shocking reminder that sometimes the most terrifying evil does not lurk in shadows, but grows under the same roof, behind familiar faces, nurtured by a rage so deep it can only end in blood. The interrogation rooms of the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office are designed to be sterile, neutral spaces, soundproofed, sparsely furnished, with walls painted a forgettable shade of beige. Their purpose is to remove all external influence, to narrow the world down to just the subject, the investigator, and the truth. For detectives Ken Swift and his partner, the room became a theater where a chilling dual performance unfolded. Separating the twins was a tactical necessity. Their bond was their fortress, a silent communication system forged in the womb. Alone, each would be vulnerable. Taz, placed in room A, initially maintained the performance, the rocking, the wide, tearless eyes, the repetitive pleas for her grandmother. She wove a tapestry of innocence, thread by careful thread. We loved our mom. She was our best friend. Who would do this? But the questions began to pick at the seams. The timeline was the first thread to snap. What time did you leave the house? We missed the bus at 7:30. We had to walk. Detective Swift would slide a still photograph from the gas station surveillance across the table. It showed two girls in school sweaters, clearly identifiable, climbing into a stranger's sedan at 8:15 a.m. That's a long walk to still be so close to home 45 minutes later, Taz. The shift was subtle. The rocking slowed. The pleading gaze hardened into something flatter, more calculating. The script was failing. When confronted with the security footage from Rockdale High's front entrance, time-stamped 9:48 a.m., showing them strolling in casually, not the breathless late arrivals they'd portrayed, the facade developed another crack. "We got a ride part way," she amended, her voice losing its melodic distress. "We must have gotten the times mixed up. It was so traumatic." Back in room B, Jazz was deploying a different tactic. Stoic silence punctuated by flashes of adolescent defiance. When asked about the blood spatter on her favorite sneakers, found shoved in the far corner of her closet, she shrugged. "We walked through the house when we found her. We were in shock. We must have stepped in it." The explanation was plausible on its surface, but it clashed with Taz's earlier vehement insistence that they had seen the blood from the hallway and run straight out to get help, too scared to enter. The detectives began to cross-pollinate the inconsistencies. "Your sister says you both ran out immediately. You say you walked through the room. Which is it, Yasmia?" The use of her full name seemed to sting. Her eyes, for the first time, flickered with something other than performative grief or defiance, frustration. The unified front was fracturing under the pressure of separate narratives. It was during a break, watching the silent feed from room A, that Detective Swift saw the most telling moment. Alone, thinking herself unobserved, Taz stopped rocking. She leaned back in the chair, her expression emptying of all the manufactured emotion. She stared at the two-way mirror, not with fear, but with a cold, assessing gaze. It was the look of a chess player contemplating a lost board, considering a new strategy. She wasn't grieving. She was problem-solving. While the psychological duel continued downtown, the forensic team at the Whitehead house was conducting a silent archaeology of violence. Every drop, every smear, every displaced object was a syllable in the story of Nikki's last moments. The bloodstain pattern analyst mapped the narrative. High-velocity impact spatter on the living room wall, behind where a lamp had been shattered, indicating a blow with a blunt object, likely the pot found nearby, while Nikki was still upright. Cast-off stains on the ceiling in the hallway. an arc created by a knife being swung backward, loaded with blood, between thrusts. Drag marks, not in blood, but in the subtle disturbance of the carpet fibers, leading from the hallway back toward the bathroom. The most telling pattern was the void. In the kitchen, amid a chaotic spray of droplets, was a clean, person-shaped silhouette on the floor. Someone had stood there during the violent arterial spraying, blocking the blood from reaching that section of linoleum. Later, luminol would reveal that the sink and countertops, though wiped visually clean, glowed with the ghostly blue residue of bleach-activated blood. Someone had tried to clean up, not a panicked intruder, but someone with time, presence of mind, and a desire to erase evidence. Then there were the boots. The pair of brown, lace-up boots in Taz's shoebox wasn't just stained, they were saturated. The blood had soaked upward from the sole, capillary action, drawing Nikki's life into the leather. This wasn't transfer from stepping in a pool. This was the result of standing, likely for an extended period, in a deep and flowing liquid. The criminalist noted the pattern. The heaviest saturation was around the toes and the front of the foot, consistent with a forward-leaning stance, a posture of aggression, not flight, and the clump of hair, wrapped meticulously in a paper napkin, as if to contain something unpleasant, and stuffed deep into the toe of the same boot. The root bulbs were intact, follicular tags clinging to them, a sign of hair yanked out by force, not shed. Lab analysis would confirm it was Nikki's. This was no accident, no transfer from a hug. This was a trophy, hidden in a panic, or perhaps a piece of evidence too obvious to discard, but too damning to leave in the open. It spoke of a moment of savage, intimate violence, followed by a cold, logistical mind. The Georgia prison system absorbed Taz and Jazz Whitehead. They were initially housed separately, a continuation of the strategy that had begun in the interrogation rooms. Reports from corrections officers in the early years described them as model inmates on paper, quiet, compliant, attending required programs. But the old patterns persisted. Jazz, in particular, leveraged her intellect. She enrolled in the prison's educational program, devouring coursework with the same focus she once applied to her studies at Rockdale High. Her graduation as valedictorian was a masterpiece of rebranding. In her speech, broadcast on local news, she spoke of overcoming obstacles and the power of redemption, her voice steady, her gaze earnest. She thanked her support system, making no specific mention of the life she had ended. To an uninformed viewer, she was an inspiring tale of rehabilitation. Forensic experts who saw the clip noted the chilling proficiency. "She's learned the language of remorse without necessarily embodying the emotion," one commented. "She is performing the redeemed inmate with the same skill she once performed the grieving daughter." Taz's path was less academic. She was involved in several minor infractions, possessing contraband, insubordination, hints of the underlying anger that was less easily channeled. Correspondence between the twins, monitored by prison officials, showed a relationship that remained intensely codependent, filled with coded language and shared nostalgia for their life before prison, conspicuously lacking in reflection on the act that ended it. Meanwhile, Delia Frazier aged, her visits becoming less frequent, but her faith unshaken. She became a minor figure on online forums dedicated to wrongful convictions, sharing edited snippets of the girl's childhood and her theories about police misconduct. The house on Richmond Drive was sold, the new owners unaware of its history, until a neighbor, inevitably, filled them in. The story became local legend, a dark fairy tale told to keep children in check. Be good, or you'll end up like the Whitehead twins. The final, lingering question hangs in the air, unanswered by confessions or court sentences. Why? Psychologists suggest a folie à deux, a shared psychosis, where the toxic bond between the twins created a sealed universe where their grievances magnified and their mother transformed from a disciplinarian into a captor. Their twinhood was a feedback loop of resentment, amplifying normal teenage rebellion into homicidal ideation. They didn't just want freedom, they wanted to erase the source of their perceived oppression. Nikki Whitehead fought for a better life, only to be murdered by the very futures she worked so desperately to perfect. The twins, now women, sit in their cells, serving a time that will see them middle-aged upon release. The world moves on. But the case endures as a grim archetype, a reminder that the most profound horrors are not supernatural, but familial. They begin not with a monster at the door, but with a silent, shared glance between two sisters at the breakfast table. A secret pact forming in the space where love used to be. The true shock is not just the 80 stab wounds, but the 16 years of love that preceded them, and the chilling ease with which it was all converted into hate.